Welcome back to Greenhill Strength Conditioning, Auto Repair, and General Debauchery, or Chris Greenhill's Garage, because YouTube sucks and they won't let me name it what I want to name it. I'm Chris.
I'm Chris.
And if you're Chris and I'm Chris, who's the channel named after? We'll figure it out later. All right. So today we are installing a Pertronix 600 rev limiter in Christopher's 1982 Ford Mustang GT. We're also going to be changing out the rear control arms, the uppers and the lowers. Our new upper and lower control arms are going to go in. So Chris, what do you think? Did we buy $1,000 QA1 adjustable upper and lower control arms? Did we buy $500 UPR adjustable upper and lower control arms? No, we did not do any of those things. We do budget things around here. Really, really budget things. So what did we buy? We bought the finest upper and lower control arms that $73 could buy on Amazon. Yep, $73 for the set. They are Hecasa brand, H-E-C-A-S-A. I was prepared to say this is the finest control arm that $73 could buy from China. But to my shock and amazement, these are not Chinese. These are actually from El Salvador. So yeah, apparently there's a company in El Salvador making knockoff products. I have to say though, they're generic and they're knockoffs. They're basically copying everyone else's homework, but they're actually pretty beefy. They're actually a lot sturdier than I thought they were going to be. And I can't believe it, but they appear to be real polyurethane bushings. I kind of thought they'd be, I can't believe it's not polyurethane. You know, I thought they'd be kind of cheap rubbery knockoffs, but they're actual polyurethane. My only complaint about these so far is that they were just kind of laying in a box. And I don't know if you can see that, but there are scratches and nicks, and the paint or the powder coat or whatever they're using is all chewed up. So we're going to clear coat these and stick them on. I don't want them rusting, but I'm not going to bother smoothing them out or painting them. It's not worth returning them. They're $73 control arm set. But so far I'm pleasantly surprised. If you hadn't seen it in a previous video, on Chris's Mustang, the outside driver's bolt on the top control arm on the driver's side is torn out. I don't know what's wrong with it. I don't know what happened, but this bolt hole is oblong. This hole here has been stretched and is oblong, like the metal stretched out and tore. I have a feeling that might be the upper axle bushings. So we got some new upper axle bushings for the 8.8 rear end also. And I actually splurged on these. I got actual genuine, authentic Prothane bushings. Yeah, I got Prothanes because they were only $2 more than the generic knockoffs. So, ow, that landed on my foot. So we're gonna be replacing the upper axle bushings. And if you aren't aware, the upper axle bushing will sit inside the control arm here, and well, we're not off to a good start. All right, so yep, it'll sit up there on top of the rear suspension. We're also installing this Pertronix 600 rev limiter. It seems stupidly easy to install. In fact, I'm suspicious of how easy the instructions are. I'm so suspicious of the instructions and how easy it is to install. I actually called and spoke to a guy at Aeromotive Pertronix. By the way, Aeromotive owns Pertronix. Didn't know that. But I actually called him and asked him, hey, is this accurate? Are these instructions accurate? So I just do this, 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 and this. Little 4 easy wires. And he said, yes. So we're going to install this on his car to keep from over revving the engine. And we're also going to go over why we need a rev limiter, right? There was a small little incident that occurred. So yeah, we're going to have to keep the revs in check, and hopefully this will do it. It's adjustable from 3,000 to 10,000 RPMs in 100 RPM increments. Got great reviews, so we're hoping for good things. Mostly we're hoping that I keep from destroying the engine using this thing, right, Chris? Yeah, I'd feel kind of bad if I destroyed his engine before he ever got to legally drive it. here we are inside the Mustang, and I'm gonna show you why we need the rev limiter. So the other day we were coming up one of our little local back roads. No houses, no buildings, nothing around. So we usually do a pretty hard first, second gear pull up and down the street. And this time we're coming up the street and there are a couple of cars. So we rolled through first gear, shifted into second gear. When the car's cleared, I gunned it. And the car has a tendency to break the tires loose, especially in the higher RPM band. And this time it broke the tires loose a whole lot, like a whole lot. So I felt it rev up, the shift light went off, I let off the gas. When I let off the gas, I realized the shift light was still on. Clutched it, put it into third. Uh-oh, over revved it just a little bit, just a tiny bit, right buddy? Just a little. Drove it home, and that's when we found this. Here is our Autometer Phantom Memory Recall Tack. With a push of a button, I can see how many RPMs we revved the engine to that day. I still have it recorded. Yes, that is accurate. That does say 8,400 RPMs, and yes, this yellow warning tape over here at 5,000 to 6,000 is our pre-rev limiter or red zone, and 6,000 is our red zone. That's what the engine is built for. It's not built for 8,400 RPMs. But it did happen. So I stopped immediately. We came home. I checked everything in the engine. I was worried that there was going to be a damaged spring, a piston, tapped a valve. I was worried that, many of the hundreds of things that could have gone wrong did go wrong, but everything seems fine. The engine's running great, but ever since then I've been keeping it under about 4,000 RPMs. So it's getting almost dark here in Texas. It still looks bright outside, but we're about 15 minutes from sundown, and we're probably going to go ahead and put this off and install everything tomorrow. Say bye, bud. All right, it's a beautiful morning here in Texas. We're about to install our rev limiter. Well, it's a beautiful morning until that line on the ground gets to us. It's going to go from about 65 to about 95 as soon as we get in direct sunlight. But for now, it's a nice day. We're going to install our rev limiter. There's the boy carrying our suspension stuff, and we're about to get started. Thought I'd take just a moment, show off some of my handiwork here. The weld that little tack weld we put on to hold the window frame to the door about a month ago popped loose. It's very thin gauge metal. So I came over here and I got this steel bracket, and because I'm a professional style mechanic, I put metal self-tappers in it, of course. It is now rock solid. It is actually very, very strong now. But the plan is, when I get my welder, I'm going to weld around this, seal this off, remove the window trim, seal this off. Then I'm going to take this bracket and I'm just going to weld it into the door permanently. Here's our Pertronix rev limiter. We're trying to find a place to install it. I'm guessing I'm going to put it here on the shock tower where we can still see the dials and be able to use it. I'm not really sure. I'm debating there or there, but neither one are exactly flush. We're trying to figure out where to mount it. According to Pertronix, the nice gentleman I spoke to at Pertronix, this is stupidly easy to install. Apparently you just red wire, red wire to key on ignition, black wire to ground, white wire, I think it was white wire to coil negative, and the other two wires you cap off because they only go to Chevy HEI distributors. And that's it. Not really sure how that works. I assumed it was going to have to be wired in line between the Duraspark and the coil, or the coil and the distributor, but apparently not. You just hook up those 3 wires or 4 wires, and then voodoo witchcraft happens and it magically works. So we're going to see how this goes. The guy at Pertronix told me to mount this thing somewhere warm and dry, and I told him, Texas? Yeah, we're mounting it in Texas. Everything's warm and dry. So I don't think this car's seen a drop of water yet. But we're still trying to figure out exactly where we're going to put it, where we can read it and reach it easily and it's secure. Junior's crimping some wires. We're just going to kind of crudely install this for a couple of minutes and do a test run. It says that the red wire can either go to the ignition positive on the coil or a key on ignition switch. We're going to try hooking up to the coil positive real quick and see if this thing's going to work. We just kind of loosely wired the rev limiter and we're going to give it a test run. She's not idling all that well today or running all that well today, but oh. Whoa, that's extreme. It is working. That's wide open throttle. We're doing a 3,000 RPM test run on the rev limiter. It's basically a two-step at this point. All right, we're going to go ahead and up that to 4,000 and make another test run. All right, Chris, 4,000. Let's go. Do it again. Is that 4,000 RPMs? All right. One more time. All right. Cool. Not all that crazy of the crazy, loud, obnoxious backfire it's doing when it's hitting the rev limiter, but it is preferable to over revving it. All right, so it's working. Now we're gonna take this all apart. We're gonna go ahead and wire this up full time and normally run everything professionally, or as professional as we get. As you can see, metal self-tappers mounting the rev limiter and the ground. And we are gonna, I guess, go test drive it. All right, so I was gonna clip everything and shorten it up and professionally install everything. And then I realized I was running low on wiring supplies. So I didn't do any of that. I needed quite a few things that I didn't have. What I had was a lot of extra zip ties. So we just took all that extra slack and wire and just zip tied it up out of the way. And yeah, that's what's going to pass for a professional wiring job for us today. The next time we do some wiring and we re-up on some wiring supplies, we'll probably try to remember to wire this correctly. I mean, it's technically wired correctly. It's just kind of sloppy. A lot of extra slack, but it'll work for now. It is working for now. So I think we're going to move on to the suspension. Yay! That's going to suck so bad. So we've got the car jacked up here and the suspension unloaded so we can check on, or so we can swap out our rear end. And while we're here, I decided I would just check on the drum brakes. And man, that's a good sign. They're coming apart really easy. Huh. Oh man, we got a seal leaking somewhere or something. We got some kind of grease on them. Possibly coming, yeah, I don't know what it is. But the pads look okay. They're serviceable. They probably need replaced here pretty soon, but everything is easy to get apart and everything looks like they were fairly recently replaced as far as the life of the car goes. This car did sit for several years. We don't even know how long, but all right, that's good. We'll check the other side in a minute. This side is not cooperating as well as the other side did. We're having to use a little bit of tough love with it, but it's not bad. This one's in a lot rougher condition than the other side, but the pads look better over here. So, who knows? Everything looked good though. They're functioning. Here's Junior pulling the bolts out of the other side of the sway bar. We've already got the side off. Here you see the part we're having a problem with. You can see how that bolt hole is oblonged and torn out. I've also noticed another problem. It could just be my perception. Maybe I'm wrong. But those look like much smaller bushings than the one I ordered. I guess we'll see. Here's our first lower control arm out. Pretty rough looking. You can see the bushings are kind of beat up. Pretty dry. I'm not sure these have ever been greased. The bushings are cracking a little bit. I don't know what brand these are. I don't see any markings on them, but they're pretty faded. These are probably generic eBays. Hardware is pretty old and rusted. We'll use new hardware if we need to, or if make sure it's the same size. There's our first one out, and we're going to go ahead and replace it with the new one, and then we're going to work our way up to the top ones. Here's the spring that came out of this. This thing is pretty rough looking. I have no idea what brand it is. It is pretty rusted. It did not have a spring isolator on the bottom, which is some of our squeaking. Spring isolator up top is not in great condition, but it's still soft and pliable, serviceable. We'll clean it up, reuse it. We're probably just going to put some rubber hose on the bottom of this thing as a spring isolator, because we don't have any new spring isolators. Here's Junior spraying some rust restore on our sway bar. Sway bar is in good shape. It just had some surface rust, but we're putting rust restore on our brake, what are these called? Drums. Oh my god. And our springs and our sway bar hardware. The drums just need a light coat. They just had a little surface rust on them. They're actually in real good shape. The spring is not. The spring is not in good shape at all. I am not even going to pretend that this is any kind of fix for this. All we're trying to do with the rust restore is put a coating on that will keep it from oxidizing further and rusting further. These things need completely stripped and redone, but we just don't have the time or the ability right now. The only springs I have available for this car are Eibach drag racing springs. This is not a drag racing car. We don't want to put a drag racing suspension on it. So for right now, these springs will just have to work. I mean, they're not going to break in half or anything, but ideally these would get stripped down completely and properly painted. We just don't have the time. I didn't realize how bad off these springs were. So we're going to Canyon Lake rebuild it with some rust restore. And we've already run into a snag. The nut is on this side where there's an opening and plenty of room. The bolt is wedged up in there. The muffler on the other side hangs plenty far away and hangs off of the frame rail where you can get to it pretty easy. It does not on this side. So we're going to try to go up and over the muffler with a bunch of extensions and hope for the best. Hopefully this is going to work. Here are the old lower control arms. We got both of them off. I am going to take these and use these on my car, Project White Trash. Over time, I'm going to buy new bushings for them. I'll strip them, paint them, and everything. The lowers are still good. They're perfectly fine. Just the bushings are starting to crack. Unfortunately, the springs, rust restore is not going to work. They're just too caked, too thick. The rust restore isn't sticking. They need to be completely stripped. Probably a vinegar bath overnight. We don't have the time to do that. So instead of rust restoring them, what I'm going to do is we're going to oil the crap out of them. Probably coat them in some grease and some oil, along with the spring dampeners. And we're going to slap those back in for now. The coils on our spring are measuring just over 1/2 inch. I'll probably go ahead and use 3/4 inch rubber tubing as my spring isolators. And here we have our new control arms. We clear coated them. We're letting them sit and soak in the sun to dry out. We're just putting some clear coat on because they came with some nicks and scrapes all the way through the paint. So we're just putting a little clear on them, let them dry out. When I get back from the parts store, we're going to put those on. And here you see our brand new spring isolators on, and we're about to try to get the lowers and the springs installed. Our lowers have been soaking in clear coat, so hopefully they're dry and we're about to install them. Alright, we've got the top of our first control arm in and got the grease all over the bushings. It went on relatively easy. Chris is trying to reach now and get the nut on the other end, which has proven pretty difficult because of that muffler in the way. It took about 2 hours of wrestling, but we got our first lower control arm in. Everything's just put on really loosely until we get everything lined up. It took forever. We had to do some grinding under this to get everything to line up. It has been absolutely hellish. We're going to move on to the other lower, and hopefully the uppers don't fight us as much. A little bit frustrated. These new control arms came with new hardware, which is great. Only one washer per bolt, which is pretty annoying. And I do not have enough washers to replace them. So, good times. Man, I wish they would have charged me $74 and given me enough washers. I would have paid that. As you can see, with the one control arm on the other side, we are nowhere close to this one lining up. I don't know what the deal is with that. I've never had this much trouble with control arms before. There is the problem child over there. As you can see, we decided to pull that bolt. We're going to take that control arm off and see if things get easier. Look at that. That is hideous. I'm not sure that's repairable like I was hoping it was, but maybe with some welding. So here's our culprit with the suspension. Both sides are completely reamed out. This is insane. I've never seen that before. I don't know what's going on. Could be that these bushings, generally, I bet it's those metal teeth on these factory bushings did it. You're supposed to replace those bushings when you put these control arms on. Those are factory bushings with those factory rods with those teeth on them. I think they chewed everything up. We're gonna have to get those out. Hope our new bushings fit. All right, go ahead. As you can see, we've got tired of playing with these things. We're not playing around anymore. We're just going to drill these old bushings out, chew them up, and get rid of them. They were not budging. All right, that bushing's out. Now to see if we can get the new bushing in. We've not had a good track record of doing that yet. Well, we finally got that new upper bushing pressed in. We were running out of daylight and we cannot get this lower control arm lined up. It's more than an inch off. I have pried and strained and pulled on this thing as much as possible. We need several more sets of hands to help us with it, so we're about to call it a day, I think. I don't know if we'll get anything else done today. It has taken hours per control arm. I've never had a problem like this on suspension before. We're exhausted. We are out of daylight. We have run out of time. We do have both control arms in. Springs are on. We've got the first upper control arm almost lined up. We're going to have to come back at it, finish things tomorrow. I'm back at it again early this morning. The boy's not here. I let him sleep in. He's been doing a lot of stuff here lately. I've already had to start by widening this. This will not fit around the bushings when they're compressed into the upper 8.8 housing. So I had to put these on the bench and stretch it just a tiny little bit. It's always a good sign. The good news is the upper is already lining up better than the lower ever was. So we've got to try to finish this today. It needs to be done. If it isn't done today, it's going to be next week. That means the car will have to stay on jack stands, and we don't want that. We want to be able to drive this every day. Just we've never had to wrestle with something like we've wrestled with the bushings yesterday. Oh yeah, we're starting off really well this morning. This control arm is nowhere near fitting. If I get it in the front housing, it's nowhere near the rear axle. If I get it in the rear axle, it's nowhere near the front housing. I do not remember having this much trouble installing control arms in the past. I'm guessing I probably bought some higher quality, better constructed control arms, but this is a nightmare. Well, I finally remembered that last night I had the idea that if I took off the drive shaft, I would eliminate a pivot point that was putting strain on the suspension. I forgot again this morning. I finally removed the drive shaft and I immediately got both bolts started. So that's something, and I'll take it. I will take things that were not shocking at all for $500, Alex. The other side control arm is just as chewed up. I'm sure this is almost as big a culprit as the other side. Look at that. And again, those factory teeth. I can't videotape it, but the ones on the other side where the main damage was, those teeth were hung on this. I had to pry it off and pry it open. The teeth, those bushing teeth, are what cut into this on both sides. They are teeth and they chewed this thing apart. So now it's time to get rid of those teeth. These exhaust pipes have moved up my priority list quite a ways. I never liked the fact that this 2.5-inch exhaust had these sloppy, crappy bent 2.25-inch pipes just kind of slapped on here. I was going to leave them pretty much indefinitely, but they're so inflexible I can't move them at all. I can't even take them off without cutting them. So right after New Year's, I think we're going to get some 2.5-inch, weld in a piece up here where we can disconnect them and move them, because if these exhaust pipes are out of the way, my life would be about 10 times easier right now. They have been in the way in everything I've tried to do. I gotta say, I'm not overly impressed with the quality of these El Salvador upper control arms. The lower is pretty beefy. Upper is pretty thin. I was able to finagle and manipulate the uppers fairly easily with a rubber mallet, which does not speak volumes of their structural rigidity. I'm guessing that's probably what happened to the old uppers. But we do true budget things around here. No $1 million shops pretending to be budget. No rich relatives covering us in cost. No sponsorships. So we make use of what we got. $73 got us slightly better control arms. Hopefully they last a little while. And if you think that's bad, wait till you see what I'm going to do with the old ones. Yeah, we're about to get real budget around here when it gets to my car. Look who finally decided to join us this morning. He's going to put another coat of Rust Restore on our sway bar. I'm about to put the drive shaft back on. I'm actually glad I took this off. We had another couple of bolts vibrating themselves loose. I felt a little bit of rotational vibration in the drivetrain here lately. I wasn't sure what it was. I'm not sure what's going on there. I had thread lock on these things, but a couple of them still backed out. Time to put them back. 1, 2, skip a few, 99, 100. We fast forwarded quite a bit. We now have all the control arms in and bolted up. Christopher's finishing off our sway bar. We're about to put tires on it, put it on the ground, and go test drive it. Well, after we do a cleanup of all our junk we spread everywhere. It took a couple hours more than I hoped, which it always does, but the car's back on the ground. It's not making any weird sounds. Suspension seems... All right, so we got the car back together. Rev limiter is installed. Suspension is installed. Let's see if we can get her to cold start. The other day it was actually kind of cold. It was in the high 40s, low 50s, and she did not want to start. Of course, I had the choke locked completely open because, you know, we built this car when it was 105 degrees and it was our first real cold day. But now we're back up in the 80s, so I'm not really sure where the fuel mixture is and everything. Let's see what happens. All right, yeah, started. I can't believe it. She is not running well this morning. Started up fine, but not running well at all. Not really sure what's going on. I know she needs spark plugs. We were going to do that yesterday. We were also going to finish the suspension yesterday. Didn't get around to it. Maybe we'll do it later, but I'll probably do it later this week or something. Thing is, the suspension feels good. We got a little less sway. When we hit the gas now, the car isn't lurching back and forth. Before, the car was lurching forward and back at an angle. You could feel the suspension loading to one side. Now it's nice and even. Yep. Well, our El Salvadorian suspension is a lot better than the old one for now, at least. Feels good, doesn't it, Chris? All right. We are only out here testing the suspension. We are going to go ahead and assume that the Pertronix rev limiter is going to work at 6,000 RPMs, and we are not going to push that and do a field test on it today, at least. Not today. Some other day. Yeah, suspensions feel a lot better. Straight front and back. No lateral movement. Plugs are fouled out, and I think we had a little extra fuel in the cylinders. She's cleared out now and running pretty well. Time to go home. Alright, so we weren't recording, but we did have a little test of the rev limiter a second ago. The car's pulling a lot better now. The rev limiter works great. Exactly 6,000 RPMs according to our odometer tachometer. And it stopped right there. We had no more in it. Fairly smooth, let off the gas, reacted great, so I am happy with it. Thumbs up on our Pertronix 600 rev limiter. All right, we are finally done for the weekend. You glad to have the car back, boy? I was really nervous there for a little bit. We were not going to get it done. I was going to have to stay up on jack stands for a few days, but it feels great. We have an all-new rear suspension to go with our new front suspension a couple of months back, and both of them were fun, weren't they? We had fun, right? Of course we had fun. I mean, who doesn't love grease in every pore, right? That's what hot rodding's all about. The rev limiter works great. Suspension feels solid again. Hopefully our El Salvador our upper and lower control arms and everything will last a few years. And all right, that's it. The goal now is to be done with this car. I can't even say that with a straight face. The goal is to be done with this car and just drive it, not work on it. I mean, little things. I'm going to change the spark plugs in the coming week. That'll take 15 minutes when it's cold. But the next project we have with it isn't a real project. It's we're just going to put some clear coat rust stop over some of the rust before the cold and rainy season hits. That way our rust doesn't get any worse than it's been. But I mean, that's it. We're going to rattle can that stuff with some rattle can rust stop, some clear. That's all we're going to do. And then next year, the plan is when it warms up again, we're going to take the car apart piece by piece, strip it, prime it, paint it, give it a professional paint job. Someone here hasn't decided on a color yet, I don't think, but Once we decide on a color, it's going to be primer for a little while. We're probably going to take it all apart, piece by piece, sand it, fill in the holes, the rust holes, cut the cancer out, fill those things, and then we're probably going to prime it. We're probably going to prime the whole thing and then go back and prep it and give it a full paint job. But that's it for now, and hopefully that's it for a while. Other than beauty stuff, that's all I want to do. Maybe we'll come back if we get a new heater core and heater hoses. That was actually the plan for right now, heater core and heater hoses. But the car decided it needed these other things. So our money went there. So maybe in the next month or two, we'll get around to heater core and heater hoses, and maybe we'll make a video about that. So, got anything to add, Chris? The man of few words. All right. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time. Wave. Quit being rude. Wave the boy. Bye.